Hello and welcome to Roundtable number 19 of Dualistic Unity. I am feeling humbled as we go round and round in this episode. I share a lot more of what I mean by that, but it's funny how we can get caught in thinking that a certain trajectory is going to continue in the way that we think it's going forever. And it's always just feeling better and better and clearer and clearer. And yeah, there's some bumps along the way, but sometimes reality punches you square in the fucking nose and you get knocked back a little bit, maybe a bit. And you come back to what's real. And there's always potential to learn in all of those situations. And sometimes being incredibly uncomfortable, feeling like you've lost all of the progress that you've ever made throughout your entire life is important to shift your perspective a little bit. Because as I've said many times, and I've needed to remind myself of many times in the last couple of days, in the last week or so, you're always making progress, even when it seems like you're not, even when it seems like you've taken 100 steps backwards. It's still progress. You don't have to know how it's going in order to be the process of it going, which you always are.
Keep it simple, keep it light. It really is very important to recognize that. That said, I wanted to mention quickly that a lot of what Andrew and I talk about here on the podcast, although we get into a lot of different topics, we have almost 40 community topics episodes. We go to movie reviews, we cover all kinds of things, history, science, whatever it might be. The fact is that all of this comes down to very simple principles that are applicable at numerous different stages of our own development. And what I mean is that a lot of what we talk about is useful to people who are 17. A lot of what we talk about is useful in an entirely different way to somebody who's in 28 to 30, or somebody who's dealt with childhood trauma, or somebody who hasn't. All of this stuff is usable, but at different levels of our own development. And so what I mean is that if you've went through season 1 and season 2 and you've come to an insight and you're like, oh my God, this is great, but I don't know how to integrate this, you're likely going to find a lot of what you're looking for back in season 1 and season 2, because it's not about what you're listening to. It's about how you're listening to it. You're coming to it with fresh ears. And so you're hearing something else that you weren't prepared to hear before. And I know, because it was the intention as we recorded season 1 and season 2 to make it as applicable and simple as possible. Because the more complicated it gets, while it might seem more convincing to your ego, the more distorted it gets. Keep it simple, keep it light, and go back and check out season 2.
And with all of that said, I hope you enjoy this live stream that is Roundtable number 19 of Dualistic Unity.
The first Roundtable episode after the Colorado mini retreat and the mini retreat, which was frankly awesome, I have to say. A lot of work, as always, but a lot of insight as well. We actually have a few people here who are at that retreat. We also have a few people who are coming to the next retreat, or possibly a future retreat as well. So we're just going to chat about the retreats for a bit, I think, or rather, I guess the point of the retreats, because what I always get out of this is what it is that we're doing, because the conversation is almost secondary. It is actually secondary to what's actually happening behind the conversation, which is willingly looking at uncertainty, faith, willingly being able to just sit in not knowing and not panic about it, right? So that way you can see more and more of it. And so that all said, I'm going to pass it over to Andrew, and then we're going to get into the conversation. But welcome, everyone. We are joined by Amanda and Levi, PMAC, Jay, and Tamara, who was actually at a recent retreat as well. So I'm looking forward to everybody's thoughts.
Yeah, me as well, but I'll go next. Yeah, it's man, there's a lot. I don't even know where to start, but you're kind of hit the nail on the head with these weeks, the retreats. Like anyone who's been to one knows why it's so difficult to describe it and explain, like, what's a Dualistic Unity retreat like? That's a good question. It's kind of what you make of it, what you take out of it, what you do with it. And it's just an opportunity to work through some stuff and have the space to look at some things. And I think the biggest thing I took away from it was just how easy it is, not easy, but just how often we suppress certain things as opposed to look at them. And, you know, you go through things in your life, even back from teenage years, and you figure out ways to handle those things, those feelings, and you think you're working on them and doing things with them. But a lot of what we do is just suppress them. We find ways and tactics to just not feel them as much. And that's what we think we're overcoming them, but really we're just kind of numbing ourselves so we don't have to deal with it so much. And at least in my experience, I'm sure I'll be on fucking unpacking this for months, but I realized how many things I had found ways to kind of numb, found ways to deal with without actually looking at it. And so for me this past week, it's like looking at shit that I haven't felt for 15 years. And I was just realizing how much of it were things that I had numbed almost. In weeks like this, as much as, you know, Ray and I are hosts, like we're still going through shit too all the time. And so for me, this week was really, some things came up that I hadn't felt in years, like 15, 16 years old. And I realized just how many things I did to mitigate those feelings, to kind of numb them as opposed to look at them. And so this week I was kind of faced with them and seeing them from an entirely different perspective, and was kind of trying to figure out what to do with them. And you know, I'm still kind of unpacking and everything, and not trying to make judgments or opinions of them. And that's really, I guess, what it comes down to, is just being able to look at things without so much of an opinion and just allow it to continue processing, allow yourself to continue moving through things without the opinion, because it's always the opinion, our perception of it, that gets in the way of the reality of it. So anyway, that's how my week has been. Kind of some of the stuff I'm feeling. There's a lot more there, but yeah. So
awesome.
Anyway.
Yeah, it's interesting, the process. It's not what you think. It's never what you think. And then you get looking at it and you're like, oh, I don't know if I wanted to get here. It's like, you did. You just didn't think it would be this, right? It's funny because we still have the intention to grow. We still have the intention to question. It's all of a sudden we get to this point where we're like, oh, but I thought it was this. It's like, yeah, that's kind of just how you justified the journey, right? But you really wanted this. It's just, as we've said, it's a gift with wrapping paper you didn't like. You're like, I don't know if I want to open that. But once you're through it, you learn. That's the whole point. And so it really is just an exercise in sitting in the uncertainty. And then as you do for long enough, you start to recognize how far back you were developing strategies to deal with uncertainty. And that is the case. We've been doing it for a long time, far longer than we're prepared to accept or even look at half the time. We start this journey and we start dealing with the crap we're dealing with in the last few years. And then 6 months down the road, we're dealing with the stuff we're dealing with within the last 5 years. And then a year later, we're dealing with the stuff we were dealing with as a teenager. And then we keep going deeper and we start dealing with the stuff that we were dealing with as toddlers. Because this narrative that we say, you know, let go of the narrative as truth. We've been building that narrative our entire life because nobody else has been telling us it's not the truth. Everybody else has been telling us invest in that shit, every detail of it. And so we have one thing upon another thing upon another thing, and we don't recognize it. And so as we peel away these layers, all of a sudden we're aware of darker things, and we think that we're backsliding. We think that we're not making progress anymore because it feels darker than we remember it feeling recently. But that's because it felt that dark way back. It felt that harsh way back. When you're 12 years old and you're being judged by somebody, or forced to go into school, or forced to live up to other people's expectations, or forced to perform, or forced to think that you should be something, you don't have the skills, you don't have the context, the wherewithal, the life experience to have any fucking idea why. And so you're traumatized by this thing, and you develop whatever strategy you can, which is usually toxic. And then years later, you're dealing with all kinds of stuff, and you think it's other stuff. You really do think that your current problems are separate than the problems you had that when you were a teenager. It's not the case. They're the same problems layered upon one another. right? And so as we gain awareness, we learn to peel those layers back. And that's the point, is seeing it and not running from it. Because that's what we learned to do, was run from it, to numb ourselves from the trauma that is this prison planet of a society, instead of dealing with the emotions and recognizing why we're running. It's because we don't think we're enough. And of course we are. Of course we are. It's just another narrative. At the end of the day, the only reason you don't think you're enough is because you're thinking. Period. So that all said, I'm going to pass it over first to Tamara, who I am very happy to see, who has not joined us on a roundtable before, I believe, but I had the pleasure of meeting recently. And so I just wanted to pass it over to Tamara and, I don't know, get her thoughts off the top of her head.
I was not prepared for this, Ray. Gosh. Well, I like to think that I chose the FOMO edition of the retreat, where I come to the beginning of the retreat and then leave while everyone else continues to have fun and enjoy themselves for the rest of the time. And as it turns out, that was actually perfect for me. There was a lot of really important and wonderful and hard and all the things that happened during the retreat. And then when I left, there was a hole. There was a hole, and there was, I was really craving and missing and wanting that. I wanted to be back. I wanted to be with all of you in a really intense way. And somehow that was perfect, because it was this realization that is the pattern there, right? Like you're always craving to have, to hold, to keep, to, and you never can. You'll never do it. And so that was a lot to work through. It was a lot to process, and I'm grateful for all of it. And I'm really glad to be with you all again.
Yeah, it was an absolute pleasure. I think one of the things that I enjoyed the most about our conversations was just the recognition of the balance of everything. Like I tend to lean towards laughter, as everybody here well knows. I tend to look towards the absurd, and I choose to laugh at it. But the reason I do that is frankly because I also look at the tragedy of it. I look at the sorrow behind all this. I look at the reality of our experience. You'll notice I'm never shying away from the fact that shit's weird in the world. Things are hard. People are hurting. There's a lot of stuff that you could easily call evil. Absolutely. But that said, you have to take the perspective where you can shoulder all that shit. Like, that's the whole point. Like, if you're looking at it and it's burying you, that's not helping you. But being able to look at it and balance out that weight so you can continue on. Well, now you're continuing on with all of that context. Now you're continuing on with that deeper understanding of how much everybody is dealing with and running from. And a lot of people don't even know how much they're running from. And so it's important to keep that in mind. But this is why it's important. And again, the deeper you go, the more it feels like you're not making progress, because that's part of going into it. Part of the experience of going into the darkness is the experience that there's nothing but the darkness. It's not true, but that's the experience of the darkness. So I'm going to pass this over to Andrew and then Amanda, and then we're going to pass it to everybody else. And the only reason I'm going to pass it to Amanda next is because Amanda was fucking instrumental in this entire week for Dualistic Unity. She was key in terms of organization, of being there for so many guests. She is constantly just a source of inspiration for all of us. And of course, she's always there as an ear if you happen to be going through some shit, which I know Andrew and I have often taken advantage of, because she's so easy to talk to. But I just want to give a huge shout out to Amanda. I know everybody at the retreat this week felt exactly the same. Amanda, thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Amanda, so much. You really mean a ton to everything that's going on here. Whatever Dualistic Unity is, you are vital to it. And yeah, I'll pass to you in a second. But Tamara, what you were saying with like leaving and that sort of attachment to a situation or feeling like you don't want to leave it. It's funny because at the retreats, like everyone's very involved, everyone's very attentive to and wholeheartedly in the experience that they're having. And so a lot of times we can think that it's the situation that was the amazing thing. And I'm not saying that our retreats aren't dope, because they are, but the experience that you had at the retreat was being attentive to your experience with a bunch of other people who are being attentive to their experience. And that's always there. Like that's can be attentive to this experience, can be attentive to any other experience, and just be really involved in the experience that you're having. Like that's the experience that we're all trying to get to or trying to hold on to. But as soon as we label something as that and try and get back to that, we're missing that experience that we're having in each and every moment. And it's super common. Like I do that all the time. I think fucking this week I've been like, look, I remember when I was clear like a month ago, and I feel like I'm not clear at all, and I don't even know which way is up right now. And we can long for that past experience where we attached that experience or labeled it as being clearer or being more attentive or being more incredible. But that potential is always there, from the end of the spectrum that's incredible to the end of the spectrum that's fucking brutal hell. That potential is always there depending on how you see it, and it's always that. And with Ray, what you were saying, and just an example, because we chatted earlier today and I wanted to bring up this example of feeling like you're backsliding or not making progress, this is Ray's example, to give him credit, but with the game Mario Brothers, like for those who have played it, basically, you go through all these levels and you start out in pretty simple stuff, jumping over shit and like avoiding stuff, but eventually it gets harder and harder and harder till you get to the end and you kind of complete the game. And then it sends you back. And then that's the start of level 2. And it's the same thing as level 1, just everything's a little bit harder. Everything moves a little bit more quickly. Everything's a little bit tougher to navigate. And that's exactly how I'm feeling. And it totally reframed how I was seeing things, because you can so easily feel like you're back. Like I straight up after this week felt like I was back in my 15-year-old shoes, experiencing everything in the same way, like fucking being worried about how people are perceiving me, like wholeheartedly lost in that. And all it is, I'm able to handle it now. Like I'm able to go back to those things that I had completely forgotten what those feelings were like, and able to see them from a totally different point of view. And it's like going through, level 1 and moving back to the beginning, thinking like, oh, I'm restarting. But no, it's you've gained all of that understanding, all of those experiences as you were going through everything. You got to a point where you were feeling great. And it's like, all right, let's dig in a little bit more. And you can feel like you're back at the start. You can feel like you just lost all that progress, but it's still there. It's always there. And your idea of where that progress lies and where you are in it is never going to be correct. Your thoughts about the decision you're going through is never going to be reality of what it's going through. And I think it's important to keep that perspective. And yeah, that example has just helped me a lot. So I figured I'd get that in here on today's live stream. But yeah, I will pass to Amanda.
Will it let me?
Yeah, we can hear you. We could hear you. There we go.
All right. I think it's working. All right. Well, yeah. Thank you so much, guys. I had the most amazing 10 days of my. It meant every moment felt so incredibly full, and it felt so amazing and so perfect, because everybody that was there, everybody that was there, we felt the Discord community. We talked about them. We brought you guys with us. So even though it wasn't everybody physically there, it felt like all of us. It felt like all of me was there. And it reminded me of the feeling of falling in love, but not falling in love, but falling into myself by falling into you. And when I felt you fall into me, it felt like you were falling into yourself. It was incredibly impactful. I've been crying on and off all day today, because I just feel so incredibly grateful. You know, like it feels like the most impossible dream is coming true. And logically, it doesn't make sense that I could get this dream, because a part of me resonates, Andrew, with what you're feeling like, of being that teenager who is uncertain and not, you know, the most worthy or valuable. So to imagine something that is not the best, to have the best experience or to get the best dream possible to come true, it just doesn't make sense. But at the end of the day, you know, I don't need to understand every piece, and I don't need to understand why this is happening, but I am so incredibly grateful that it is, and that I am here with all of you, because this means more than I could ever describe. So the reason why I give so much is just because it feels so effortless, so wonderful, and it just feels like taking care of us, you know, of the greater, like there is no I. And so when we were having that 3-gram trip on the last night, it hit me very hard. And at first I thought like, oh, this is, you know, this is just another trip, we're gonna feel some insecurities, and then the floor drops and you get fucking engulfed. And it felt like I was feeling waves of insecurity washing up on the shores of awareness or something like that. And even though I could feel the waves and I could feel myself, I could feel the water like trickling in and engulfing and surrounding me, they didn't feel like my insecurities. And what I mean is that they didn't feel like they belonged to anyone in particular. They didn't belong to me, and they didn't belong to anyone else, but it did feel like I was swimming in the insecurities of other people. And I mean that like, Andrew, I imagined living your life, and if I lived your life, I absolutely would have felt everything that you felt, and I felt that while you were feeling it. And I felt the same thing for Mark. You know, if I lived his life, I would have felt his insecurities about his life or religion or sexuality. Or for you, it's, you know, what do I have to offer? Is it even good enough? And you know, I felt those like they were mine, and yet they weren't mine, and they weren't yours either. It just felt like they were just waves hitting the shore. And then as soon as I just could accept or could acknowledge that they didn't belong to anyone, they just ebbed right back into the ocean of thoughts and emotions. And sometimes it feels like I'm surfing those waves and thoughts and emotions, and sometimes it feels like I have fell off the board of awareness, or I fell off the board of attention and time and got swept away in the current. But ultimately, I trust myself to find my way back to the shore, even when I'm in the waves, or even when I'm standing on the shore about to walk back into that uncertainty, because I don't know if it'll be a smooth surfing, or if it's going to feel like I'm hitting the water face first, you know, and that impact, that sting. And but it just felt so wonderful to be there with all of you, and to walk into the ocean together, and to be the ocean, and to be everything, and then to be the shore that we came back to. And so I'm just very grateful that we're sharing this presence. And I could never say how grateful I am for all of you, but I do my best to show you, because you can feel where the action is coming from, and it has nothing to do with proving that you're good enough or that I'm good enough. I'm just doing what feels like we all want. And so every time I would get water for us, or every time I would set up a dinner or a surprise or a snack, it felt like I'm hungry, we're probably all hungry, why don't we nourish ourselves. And when it felt like someone else, like Tamara, when you were getting the water, it felt like the other end of that spectrum. And I felt like when you were filling my cup, you were filling your cup. And it felt so beautiful to be in that exchange, where there wasn't a need to fill a cup, there was just a genuine appreciation for the experience of a filled cup.
I can't tell you how much we appreciate it, and I know you know that, and very much. I love what you said there. It's non-specific. It's the experience of uncertainty itself. We think it's insecurity, but it's just how we translate our own faith, our lack of faith in ourselves. That's all it is. All right. Now, before I go any further, I'm going to pass it over to Tamara, who I know to follow up with this. Hi, Tamara.
Hi. Oh, it was first of all, Amanda, I love you. That needs to be said. It was a while back when, Andrew, you were talking about I don't remember how you stated it, but I can remember what my insight was, so I'm just going to share that part. It was remembering that Oh, I remember. Okay. So when I said that I was in FOMO and I was missing you all so much. And I did have that insight that I was I was the one that was present in that space. I was the one who had shown me love. I was the one who had shown me attention and presence and acceptance and everything that I've ever wanted from someone else, that I had done that for myself, and that truly it had come home with me, that presence, that acceptance, that love had come home with me. And I saw myself sharing that with my daughter, and I saw myself sharing that with everyone in my life. You know, it was always me from beginning to end. And it was a really powerful realization to just shift that. You know, I still missed you guys, but it was totally different. It wasn't coming from a place of need or lack, because it was already there. Always is, always has been, always will be. All of the tenses.
Very, very well said. Oh man, because and that's it. Like, you would have never known how the experience would play out so that you could go back to see things differently. But it did play out in the way to allow you to see things differently. And we always, we want to maintain this idea and that things are just going to be on this fucking smooth trajectory, like everything's great, and we just get to a spot where we're feeling clear, feeling good, able to empathize with everyone, able to experience, everything. But in order to empathize with people, it's not just feeling good. Like, a lot of people aren't feeling great all the time. A lot of people are dealing with a lot of shit. And the more you open yourself up to all of those experiences, the more you're able to connect or see things from a different point of view. Tamara, very similarly, I came back with an entirely different perspective of people in my life who in the past I'd gotten frustrated with about certain things that I fucking realized were just things that I had suppressed for a very long time. And when they acted in that way, it reminded me, without realizing it, this is just me realizing it fucking today, like an hour ago, that when I would see that, the reason I would get frustrated is because that's something that I had pushed down for myself. It wasn't that I had overcome it like I thought I had, like my fear of judgment or concern about what other people think. Like, it wasn't something that was overcome. It was something more so that was just numbed. And so when someone else, say family or a friend, would get super caught up in being concerned about judgment, it would be like, oh, they're not thinking about you as much as you think. Like, it doesn't matter, blah, 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 blah. And there would be some frustration in there. Whereas now that shit's come up and I'm like, oh, I feel you. And it's a totally different perspective, but you can't have that without going through an experience yourself, whether it's, beautiful or incredibly uncomfortable. And it's always you, always meeting yourself, interacting with yourself, whether you recognize that from the depths of like just being you to just everyone being a reflection for you to see things. And the frustrations and the things we get caught in are usually pointing to something. There's something under the surface that we don't want to look at. And when we have the space to just sit with ourselves, we can realize how many of those things that we get worked up about or frustrated about are just within us. Like, they're just things that we're not looking at in ourselves. And so, yeah, I resonate with that a lot because it can shift everything. And it's just adding more and more perspective and ways of seeing things so that you can connect with more of yourself. Like, it's vital to go through the shit on your own in your experience and feel certain things in order to be able to connect. And that's the thing with Krishnamurti. I think he was asked once if someone could just be clear their whole life. It's like, you wouldn't even want that. There would be no ability to empathize with people, no ability to connect with people. Like, the shit we've been through is what allows us to connect. The ability to look at it and face it and see it for what it is allows us to see it with everyone else and empathize with everyone we interact with on such a deeper way. Without it, it's like there's very little ability to connect in that way. So I definitely feel you, and have been, I don't know, this shit's gonna keep unraveling, but yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, Tamara.
Very much. Absolutely. This has been a fun conversation. It's interesting because I've said it numerous times, and people tend to disregard it because, of course, when we're trying to get out of our suffering and our and all the entanglements that we've trained ourselves to be in over time, we tend to have this idea like, yeah, it's going to be better than this. It's like, yeah, but that changes in terms of what you mean by better. By better, like we tend to have an idea that the goal is the cessation of all pain and suffering, whereas I would say it's the alignment with pain and suffering, the acceptance of pain and suffering, even the ability to look at pain and suffering and to act with awareness rather than fear. And that's really it. It's not about escaping part of what you are. It's about becoming more aware of what you are. Right. And this is why it's important to go through pain and discomfort. It's important to go back through the memories that you don't like going through, not deliberately, but as a result of where you are in your journey, because it'll happen on its own. You do not need to go and look for your past trauma. It will find you. No worries. As you are going through your journey and you start facing little things like, I'm not going to worry about Jim in accounting judging me anymore. I'm not going to worry about Sally, down at the coffee shop who keeps getting my goddamn order wrong. Just not going to attach to it. I'm going to let it go. And then all of a sudden one day you recognize something that happened in high school where you actually, it was the first time you really held on to it and made it a grudge and it ruined your year. And then all of a sudden you're just like, oh my God. Oh, I can't believe I did that. And it's just that it was always in there, influencing everything that you've ever done since. But you forgot about it because you've been so caught up in coping with everything since then. And these coping mechanisms, they pile up on top of one another. They really do. We really just don't, we lack awareness of how much we've learned to do over time. And this is why it's important to go through those painful memories. This is why it's important to go through, that period of discomfort, because if you don't occasionally go down to hell or even always have one foot in hell, it's very difficult for you to talk to everybody else who's stuck there or perceives themselves to be stuck there. People in hell can't hear people in heaven. It is very important to remember that, because it does nobody any good to talk to somebody from on high. Oh, it's great up here. You're going to love it, when they're down there going through all kinds of shit. And I understand that's all symbolism. There's no heaven or hell for anybody who's listening to this for the first time. That's all bullshit. I just want to throw that in there. But it really is just about understanding that freedom isn't the cessation of all the shit you don't like. It's just not letting it land a blow. It's being aware of it without being afraid of it. It's very much like flight, as we've said before. Flying is all risk. It's all risk. If you're in the air, you could fall. Right? It's important to be aware of both of them in order to be informed by it, right? So that is the entire point that I had, and I'm going to pass it on now because I could just keep rambling, as everybody knows. But at the moment, I was wondering if I could pass it over to PMAC. And the reason is because she has been working on in-person groups on her end, which is in New Zealand. And I've been inspired by this. This is something that we hope to inspire other community members to do. If you have a place that you can get people together and have these conversations yourself, do. Because it's the point. It really is. Like, these retreats really drive it home. The podcast is fun. The groups are great, especially because we get to interact with one another like this. But to actually be in real time with somebody, to share that space with them, to be able to feel who they are and how they contribute to the experience that you're having, it's a different thing. It goes far deeper than any of the conceptual mumbo jumbo. It really is just about connection. And so if you can host something like that in your town or city, if this is something you're willing to do, let us know. We would love to know what you're doing, and we'll try and promote it if we can. We're working on adding something to our website, which will have a list of groups around the world, just in case you happen to be in the area of one, so you can reach out to connect. So that all said, I am going to pass it over to PMAC, who I have not had the chance to talk to in quite some time. Hi, PMAC.
Hello. What did you even just ask me? I'm like,
I actually noticed that I didn't ask
so
you anything
much.
there, so I just kind of dropped it on you. Went, hi, PMAC. More or less, I guess, being in this group, because you have a lot of passion for all of this. You really do. Like, you volunteer a lot of time, you get in touch with me frequently, and as I said, you're hosting in-person groups. I guess the whole point is that it's not something that you feel you should do. It is something that you very much, I can see very much that it's something that you feel. And I guess I would love to know how that journey has been going for you, because we've been talking for quite some time now, and you just seem to laugh more and more easily all the time. And it's not the result of you memorizing anything. It's not the result of you learning anything by any means. It really is just a result of you just seeming more relaxed. And so I was hoping maybe you'd just tell us a little bit about that journey and why it is you've decided to host in-person groups.
Yeah. So, PSA as well, if there are any New Zealanders out there, I am in Auckland at the moment, but I've set a date and my partner and I are moving down to Christchurch at the end of July. So I'll probably start up a new group in Christchurch. So if there's anybody in Christchurch, get in touch with me somewhere on the Discord. I'm very easy to find around. And if anybody in Auckland wants to like start the group, I have like a really cheap rental in the city, a good deal, so I can just like pass it over to anybody if they want to carry the groups on. I've actually only done, I think, one out of the ones that I've booked in, because work has been super busy, and like I've kind of popped across the road and not sure if like anybody's turned up, because I'm for some reason not getting emails saying when people subscribe to the event. Oh God. So, and it's very symbolic because life has just been like pushing, exactly what you were saying before, Andrew. Like, I've just been kind of like sweeping this stuff under the carpet of like, am I really part of dualistic unity? And this is how far the symbolism goes. So in primary school, the group of friends that I had, there was four. There was four of us, and something happened in which made like me just get straight up cut from the group, and they were just like, nope, you're out, it's just going to be us three now. And I basically didn't make friends with anyone until the end of primary school, so like a year and a bit, when I'm like 8. And the girl that in my mind I was like, she must not have liked me, and like this is how I ended up getting cut from the group. Her name was Amanda. So you just had like this big introduction to Amanda at the beginning of like the DU group after you guys have been hanging out together. And I'm just like, this shit is getting like too obvious that I can't ignore it anymore. Like, how can it just be this? I don't know. Life is funny. It's very witty, I think, if you can see what it's really doing. But when you keep on trying to like sweep it away, it's very frustrating. Yeah, so I really enjoyed the intro, and you got me in all of the right feels to see what is like actually going on, and just allowing it and knowing that there's nothing to worry about and there's nothing to protect. Like, if you're just a dot in the ocean, everything flows through, but as soon as you start like solidifying, then there's like turbulence with, like this like mass that's being produced. So yeah, I'm very glad that you're back, and I really love this. I don't even know what it is, but we've changed. Can everybody see that we've changed? It's just like so much lighter.
Exactly. No, this is great.
Yeah. I hear it for sure. That recognition that things can continue popping up, and I had something else and I don't remember what it is. So I'm just going to go with the insight I had before it. With the suppression of things, like a lot of it can be the pushing of it like under your bed, like putting dirty clothes. I used this example last week at the retreat a couple times, but it's like having a dirty room and just pushing all the shit under your bed, and like, oh, I have a clean room now. But that stuff under your bed still kind of smells, and it's still impacting your day to day. It's impacting your sleep. It's impacting every time you're in the room and you're doing work, and you kind of forgot about it. You kind of forgot you put a bunch of shit under your bed. And so a lot of this process is pulling that shit out from under your bed and looking at it. And then once you look at it, you can throw it in the fucking laundry, fold it up, put it back in your closet, and there's less shit under your bed. But we get very good at just pushing shit under our bed and finding ways. Obviously, it's a simplistic example, but we find ways of just dealing with our shit. And a lot of it, as Ray was saying before, or maybe yesterday, we figure out ways to deal with it when we're kids, when we're teenagers. PMAC, in your example, when you're 4, when you're a little kid, like that's how we deal with pushing that shit away. Like it sucks. It fucking sucks. And we're like, I just want to feel a little bit better. So we find a way to push it away. And so those strategies were used when we were a kid to do it. And then we just built on top of it. And over enough time, we forgot there was so much fucking shit under the bed. We've completely forgotten about it, but it's still impacting us as much as we can feel really good about having a clean room. We forget how much shit is under there, and it's still impacting us. Like it still impacts us in subtle ways, like the ways that we act, the ways that we, get triggered by things or respond to someone or get frustrated with someone. We think it's like, oh, just this momentary thing. Oh, this thing's coming up. It's just, oh, it's something everyone experiences, whatever. But like, no, there's a depth to that. There's a reason that's coming up. There's a reason that you respond in certain ways. And we rarely look at it, but it's for everything, for every response that we have, for every way that we see someone else. If we judge someone in passing, that's like, there's a strand of that digs deep into our roots. Like that's an expression of something coming from somewhere else. And so a lot of this process, as much as, digging in, letting go of stuff, recognizing things can feel great. When you start digging deeper and deeper into certain things, you start to see more and more. You go back to some of those experiences that you learned how to deal with when you were 4 or 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 or 25 or whatever age that it happened. And you look at it from a new point of view because you've gained a lot. And now you're looking back at it and you're like, oh shit, that was something big. I totally forgot what that felt like. And now you're seeing it because you're digging in. And once you work through it, once you see it for what it is, it doesn't have that day-to-day impact, that day-to-day, moment-to-moment impact quite so much anymore. And that whole story, the fiction of yourself, there's so much to it. It's not just a conceptual idea. It's how we act. It's how we speak, what we do. Like fucking everything that we do is in some way informed by the story of us and all of our experiences. And we think it's just a conceptual idea, but it's also the actions that we take, the feelings that we feel, the frustrations that we have. They're all impacted by that. And they all come from somewhere. And we forget where they come from. And the digging in order to let that go, you got to dig deep into the uncomfortable shit. But then you come out the other end a little bit freer. But when you're going through it, it's like, fuck, I feel like this is going to last forever. This is the worst thing ever. I haven't felt this in so long. But then, you get through it and it's just coming back to what's real and using all of the perspectives that you've gained over the years. And that allows you to work through the thing. But it's like, it's always happening too. It's just paying attention to what's real allows that process to continue happening. When we start digging in there, start thinking about it, like, oh, how do I get rid of this? How do I overcome this? How do I work on this? That's just almost hindering that processing from happening. Like as you just pay attention and are involved in your life, it allows it to happen more and more seamlessly, more and more efficiently. We dig in there, think we have to do something about it. It's just fucking with it. So you don't even have to do anything, which is kind of the beauty of it. It's just sitting in the uncertainty willingly, recognizing just how uncertain it is and recognize how uncertain the experience that you're having is and the feelings that you're feeling and all of it. You don't know what's really happening. So you can just keep paying attention to what is happening in reality, which will allow the things that are processing to just keep processing.
So that said, I'm going to ask if you'd like to tackle the question that's currently on the screen. Do you guys think that you can go through things we didn't deal with in the past while being on antidepressant medication? Now, I've been on antidepressants and whatnot, so I'm going to actually just pass this over to Andrew first, and then anybody else who would like to field it. I know this is a new interface we have here, but we have a private chat section. I know we can't raise our hands like we do on Zoom, so do let me know if anybody would like to jump in, and then we'll pass it over to you as we go. But Andrew, given everything that you just said about the importance of sitting through it, do you think that you can do that while not actually feeling it fully?
Short answer, no. I've never been on antidepressant medication, so I feel, obviously I still have the perspective and everything that I said, and just our ability to suppress certain things. And I think antidepressants are another thing that is like one of the tactics of suppression as opposed to looking at it. It's an avoidance tactic as opposed to a looking at it tactic. that's the thing. So no, I don't think so. And that's why, something like mushrooms, because a lot of what came up were, there were substances involved and whatnot. And I have, it's funny just the irony, because I was talking to someone the day before. I had back-to-back experiences where I was fucking crying a bunch. And the day before, someone was talking about how most of their experiences on mushrooms were very, very emotional, and it's always like they were always on tears. And I was like, oh yeah, that's not always the case. Like, actually, most of the time, mushrooms are a great time. And it was the day before, I just had back to back digging into shit. I just like crying so much going through it. But it's that, and that's why those substances are helpful, because they almost force you to look at it as opposed to suppress it. And so I think, long story short, with things like antidepressants, they're another tactic to avoid the pain as opposed to look at where it's coming from. And in order to let it go, you have to look at where it's coming from, which is not comfortable almost ever, but it's vital to being able to let it go and move beyond it.
Absolutely. Jay, you have a follow-up thought for this?
Hey, yeah, how's it going, everybody?
Good. Welcome. Glad you could join us, as always.
Thank you. It's good to be here. Y'all enjoyed the retreat?
Very much. Looking forward to seeing you.
Yeah, Andrew, you're talking about as things come up, kind of uncovering them and being able to look at them and deal with them if you just kind of can be basically just be. And I've been kind of going through that a lot, dealing with some stuff that normally, like looking back, I probably would have handled a whole lot different back in the day. I was looking through some of my old notes, actually. I was opening up my notepad to write down some things to get done today or whatever. I'm looking at my notes, and it's like one of the pages was like 8/1/22, and it was just happened to be some notes. I was like journaling back then. Notepad I haven't opened up in quite a while. And I remember like back at that time, I was getting into DU and stuff like that. And I really thought like I kind of had like arrived sort of like spiritually, like I don't know. I just thought I kind of like had it figured out. Like the ego, like my ego is dead, the fucking mushrooms just kind of helped me see everything. I really thought I like got it, you know what I mean? And so as I'm looking at these like notes, it's all like derived in self, it's all like I could see like I was kind of in this initially to sort of get somewhere, like to relieve the suffering and stuff like that. And now being that it's just sort of relax, pay attention and be yourself, normal status, that's kind of like how I'm living. And I'm able to sort of see these things that I built up through the traumas over the past and stuff like that, going back to the initial point too. And it's like, wow. And then you were right. You're like, I've been able to just kind of shed those off. Like once you can kind of look at it without identifying with it, it's like, okay. And then it's gone. And they may come back again, I'm sure. But I just had that direct experience recently looking back at the journal. And another thing too, I recently lost a pet. It was a sudden, unexpected, few days ago. And that's another thing. Just not being able to so much identify with it. Like, I grieved. I went through the process and felt it all, but I didn't feel like there was anything I had to do or anywhere else to be other than just be, and I was still able to be there and present for my life as it was in the present while, that is going on too. So like, yeah, that and all, like, I'm really looking forward to just hanging out with you guys. It's kind of like I don't have any expectations going up into Vermont. Like, this is going to be pretty dope, as they say. I'm just looking forward to having a nice time. With that, I'll pass on.
Yeah, likewise. I'm really, it's the experience of just being together. It's really funny to me because there are a lot of people when they meet me for the first time, they're just like, oh, and that's really what it is. That's not what I thought was going to happen. And it's just because you're there. All of a sudden, all of your illusions just vanish because I do everything I can to destroy them. I really do. Like, I like being weird. I like just talking about shit. I like making jokes that are inappropriate. I love all that shit because it just means that we get to be open with one another. There's no judgment, right? Just be what you are. And that is the most powerful thing that we can do for anyone ever, including ourselves, right? It's just, and of course, doing that with yourself means you can do it with others because they are the same thing. In fact, I'm going to pass this over to Andrew, and then I'm thinking about passing it over to Levi shortly. He's just sitting there quietly. I'm going to give him a little bit of a heads up, though, while I pass it over to Andrew first.
Yeah, and it's funny, even at the retreats or just any situation that we have, thinking that we know what's best and like what's best for the experience itself, and we get caught in that and trying to be that thing. But the reality is that we don't know what's best for that experience. Like, we don't know the best thing for someone to see, especially, there are times where I do my best not to, but like, hosting retreats is a very new experience for me. And I oftentimes feel like, what the fuck am I doing this stuff? But at the same time, it's like, you're still playing your role, whether you know it or not. And sometimes, like for this past retreat, I went through a lot of shit came up. And sometimes that could be the thing that someone needs to see. Like, if they have an idea of, maybe say they have an idea of Ray being like, fucking Eckhart Tolle, like I did for the first 8 months of the podcast. And then they meet him and they're like, oh, you're not Eckhart Tolle. Eckhart Tolle does not do hot knives in his kitchen. I'm pretty sure. And, say dirty jokes all the time. And for me, sometimes people have an idea that like, I don't deal with as much shit anymore. And so sometimes that's what someone has to see. And like, for me to think that, and there's no way for me to fake that. Like, you can't fake going through shit or just tell someone like, oh yeah, I go through shit too. And they're like, oh, sure you do. Like, I don't believe you. And so sometimes that's what someone has to see. And like, here I am getting caught and thinking, oh, I'm, not doing the right thing. Whereas maybe it was exactly the perfect thing. And it's always the case. And we never actually know what the best thing is or what's actually happening or what the overarching situation is. Like, we don't know what's really going on ever. Like, I re-listened to one of our older episodes actually on my car ride. I had like an 8.5 hour car ride yesterday after Denver. Just listening to our episode, it's season 2, episode 4. It's called Cycles Within Cycles. And someone Rainer actually had brought it up that he's re-listened to that a bunch. And someone else commented on the social media post how they had just listened to it. And I was like, all right, I'm going to re-listen to it. And it hit me how many things, because a lot of what we talk about are just from the micro to the macro, how there's so many cycles going on for ourselves, for the situation that we're going through, for a broader scope of our life. And especially when you factor in being fucking everything, there's a lot of cycles happening all the time, and you never really know what's actually going on. It's hilarious that we can think that we know what's actually happening and the situation that we're going through, what it means or what the best case thing is. And so we hold on to that and we fear letting it go, but we never really know. And so I think that's just very important to keep in mind anytime you're going through shit. It's like, I don't know where this is taking me. I don't know what there is, but you're going to get a lot more out of it by paying attention to it as opposed to pushing it away, as opposed to trying to come up with a tactic of avoidance, which is a lot of what we did when we were younger, because we didn't have the wherewithal to understand, oh, there's a lot of shit going on. All you knew was your experience. And you're like, I feel fucking miserable right now. How do I get rid of this? So that's what we did, as opposed to looking at it, being like, oh, It's like, when you're 10, 15 years old, you're not sitting in brutal suffering being like, I wonder what the bigger picture is of this situation. You're like, I need this to stop. So you come up with ways for it to stop. And you get, and a lot of them are detrimental and a lot of them seem fine, but it's still any tactic we use to avoid isn't actually looking at it and being able to look at it and just be like, yeah, something's happening. I'm going to keep paying attention because there's a lot to learn here, but I don't really know what's actually happening. Coming back to that, just coming back to the uncertainty, as always, is vital to just being able to continue moving forward and gaining and learning as much as you can along the way. Because in order to learn something from it, you have to be willing to look at it.
Literally, the only way to learn is to go into uncertainty. That's what learning is. Going into uncertainty and learning from it, right? And that's it. But it's the willingness to do it. And if you're afraid of being wrong, if it defines you, then you'd almost prefer not to learn at all. That said, Tamara, you have a following thought.
I do. Oh, yeah. So you were talking about, people not being what you expect them to be. And I feel that. And I also really recognize how I try to manage how others perceive me. In this space here, we don't see each other all that often. We're on the call for maybe an hour or two, and then off we go to our lives. And so we have these little snippets of ideas of who each other are and what we're like and how we move in the world. And then going into, a more sustained period of time where I'm going to be with y'all for a few days, noticing myself trying to be cool, trying to edit, trying to not be so damn controlling, and all these things that I'm trying to tamp myself down and be something that I think will be more likable, approachable, enjoyable, whatever, fill in the blank. And the realization I really had is oh, that was all a really giant waste of time. Because when it came to the end of it, it's oh, everybody can see what you're doing. You can tell when somebody's, and it might even be a subconscious thing that you're picking up. You're not really even noticing that you're noticing, but you can pick up when people are not being themselves, when they're holding back, when they're trying to, get something from you, really is what it is. And so it was just a really good reminder to me of well, some of the ways that, or some of the, the behaviors or whatever that I have, we're all dealing with shit. We all have our pattern conditioned behaviors. It's this is what it is. Here I am, and this is a thing that I do, and let's just be myself and see what happens. What a freeing way to think about it, and definitely not practiced in this yet, but at least I can see it a little bit better.
Well said. It's funny how often we'll think that we're the only one who goes through shit, and we try and hide everything about us, all of our insecurities, fears, concerns, and meanwhile, odds are there's at least a few other people that maybe we're interacting with who feel the exact same way, and we just try and hide that. And when you recognize that your insecurities are a strength, like that quote that Ray put up, your wounds are where the light enters you, that's also how we connect. It really is how we find deeper connection, because the depths of ourself is the shit that we've been through, and that's the stuff we try to avoid. Meanwhile, it's the thing that connects us all, because it's digging down to the root of reality is that everything is you. And so the more you recognize it, the more willing you are to dig into that, because that's where the connection is found. Everyone's stemming from that root. Everyone's stemming from, when you go deep enough, everyone's stemming from the same root, and we perceive the suffering in different ways and deal with it in different ways, but we're all coming from the same spot, and we're all so much our experiences are so much more similar than we realize in a lot of ways too. We all go through, we translate it in different ways, sure, and sometimes we don't translate it in different ways. Sometimes we're actually going through something very, very similar to someone else, but just being willing to express that and be honest about it and be open about it and not try to avoid it or act differently because of it, thinking that, oh, I can't act this way or say this thing because they might see me in a way that I don't think is best for them to see me, when you can't know how they're going to see us anyway. And so just being willing to step into it with all of the insecurities, with all of the discomfort, with everything that we have in us, and continue moving on without the thought of thinking that there's something wrong with it. Just being like, yeah, this is everything that I am. This is what I am. Take it or leave it. If you're not crazy about it, that's okay. I don't need someone else to see me in a specific way. And when you come to terms with that, you're more willing, and the cycle just kind of bounces back and forth, and it continues on. But yeah, being willing to open yourself up and share everything that you are is a superpower. It really is, because that's what allows for the connection, and everything that everyone wants, the deeper connections are found through that. They're not found through the superficial bullshit and the hiding of ourselves. It's found through being yourself. And when you come across other people willing to do that too, it's like, fuck, that that connection runs deeper than you might imagine. But PMAC, I know you had a hand raised, so I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think I shared it on the last roundtable that I had done the self-devotion ceremony. And so I just thought maybe my vows were sitting right next to me, basically like a marriage to myself. And so I thought I could read out my vows. Are you ready? Hello, me. I love me. Welcome home. Not just the silly, fun, giggling me who is full of grace, who I wish I had more of, but also all of the angry and the frustrated and the overly passionate, the weird, who was made to feel small and unsafe. I welcome you back. There is only the illusion of right and wrong. Everything is acceptable. Everything I am is acceptable. I give me full permission to be 1100% entirely, infinitely, and divinely me. Past, always present, and future. Inside, out, and beyond all of it. It is all my loving gift to me. Enjoy it all, embrace it all, get frustrated and angry with it all, completely free and boundless. I am blown away by my everlasting patience, faithfulness, and commitment to true self. No matter what, I love me forever and always, my first and foremost.
That was beautifully said, PMAC. I love it. And that resonates with me a lot, because I think basically until this last week, there's been a big part of me that has sort of looked at only one side of the spectrum, like the recognition that I'm not what I think, that I'm never what I think, and kind of discounted how much of what I've been, like the story of Andrew, has continued to impact me. And so there's been like an unwillingness to look at that side and take that perspective, as you just shared, from that, like looking within, as opposed to just recognizing, oh, that's not me. That's not what I am. None of it is me. It's like, it fucking sucks to admit, but there was such a degree of like suppression of that I'm now realizing. And I know that that's a part of it, is going through it. And, I've had a lot of recognitions and whatnot, but there has been a big part of me that has not been willing to look at certain tendencies or certain practices or certain ways that I go about things, or things that I experience, or frustrations that still come up, or insecurities that still come up, or anxious feelings that still come up. It's like, oh yeah, but I'm not that. Oh, I'm not what I think. And as opposed to looking at it, it's just like the surface, like, let's just cut that, because that's not what I am. And I recognize that clearly. And this past week has been that, like, with your vows that you shared, it's like been looking back at all of that, where all of those tendencies come from. And that is as much, if not more, of the experience of all of this than the higher minded stuff. And recognizing that you're everything, recognizing that you're God, recognizing that your reality is awesome, but it's a product of digging in to yourself and digging deeper into that, not attaching to any of it, but just being willing to look at it and being willing to see, oh, this is coming from somewhere, but it doesn't mean anything about me. But we can often, and especially in the spiritual world, just kind of jump over those sorts of things, and not give any credence to any degree of our tendencies or the story, and just kind of leap over it, and yeah, and just continue to avoid it. And something Ray said a number of times, the quote, heavenly minded but no earthly good, realizing the importance of the earthly good, and I'm appreciating that side of it much more, because as great as it can be, and it's funny, like the symbolism, like even one of my last videos was like talking about the Big Bang and like expressing that. It's like, that's great. It's great to talk about, whatnot, but it's not as much on the ground as feeling the shit and being in the shit. And the impact of that runs a lot deeper, and it's all interconnected. Recognizing that the lack of perception, that division is just a perception, can help you to work through some of that shit and not take it as personally. But there's a difference between the willingness to look at that and the avoidance of it, and looking at everything else. So yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, PMAC, though. Levi,
good to see you, man.
Great to see you.
Apologies, Levi, that was my fault.
No, that's okay. But yeah, you can hear me now. Okay, cool. Yeah, no, this conversation about suppression of emotions, and them coming up and being a lot more on the surface, is just it's really a description of my life, more or less. It's like up until about 2 years ago, I there was very little emotions in either direction. I could like laugh when I was drunk and stuff, and tell my friends I love them when I'm super drunk, and but that I was just so disconnected. It was unbelievable. Now when I'm looking back at it, it's like I just felt like when I started to see this happening, like I had at some point this realization that what the fuck is this? Like something's something's missing here. And there was just all these kind of layers outside of me, like an armor, a shell, that was so stuck. I still feel it for sure, but it's like it's coming off, and emotion is up there. Like PMAC shared this poem on Discord in the weekend, and I read it, and it was something about like the lungs, like really accepting me, like my brain and my heart and everything. And it was just, I started crying. I cried and cried and cried, and it's like this is just happening now, and it's all so on the surface. And yeah, it's I'm not sure exactly where I'm going with this, but it is super interesting. But it's like it is like there's a lot of it's quite uncomfortable, I must say. But I'm also, we're talking about, I am feeling a lot more of the good stuff as well. So it's both sides, but it's like yeah, I've been suppressing so much, and I feel like whenever I am like crying or laughing, because sometimes I laugh and kind of I feel things are releasing in a way, but it's just I usually don't, like I never get like any hit like what was this, like it doesn't really connect to anything in specific. But I really feel like in day-to-day life, when I'm like in work meetings, where I'm feeling I have to prove myself, or I just feel it all the time, when oh shit, here's some shit that I'm dealing with right now, and I'm just trying to like stay level in a way without letting it completely kick me off, like my wherever I'm going at that moment. So yeah, it's very interesting.
That's a good way
Yeah.
of putting it. It's something we said in a group recently, was something along the lines of, it really is important to not fear your worst moments, to not fear those states where you're going to get knocked off balance. You get a sensitivity for it, but at the same time, like getting knocked off balance can be kind of informative, right? So you start to recognize, like, right, here I am, going to process this, but we don't recognize that that's actually what we are. Is just intelligence. Like we go into a situation where like, this is a problem. Shit, I'm screwed. Instead of this is a problem and I'm obviously already working on it if I just let it happen. And that's what we do. We do it all the time. Somebody was asking here, why do you think we, sorry, I'm just going to bring it up here on the screen. Okay. Why do you think we use so many ways to avoid our problems instead of actually dealing with them? Well, the fact is that they're not problems. I mean, we perceive them to be problems, and then we perceive ourselves through whatever image we have. And if we don't have any faith in that image, then it's a problem. Otherwise, it's just something to deal with. Andrew?
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I mean, even just it's just that perspective of it being something wrong. Because as soon as it's something, if we have the perspective that there's a right or a wrong way to feel, there's the idea that there's something to be attached to and something to be avoided. And when you come back to the recognition that there isn't so much of that, those things don't exist in objectivity. There's actually a lot to be learned from what we perceive our problems to be, and it's just a perspective. Like you can have the idea that you have something wrong with you, and that could be the exact thing that builds a deeper connection with someone else, or even being willing to look at it from a different point of view will allow you to connect with someone else. And so if you're just constantly trying to avoid them, you're just coming up with, it's like coming up with quick fixes or like a get rich quick sort of situation just to get a little bit of money super quick, as opposed to building something that maybe doesn't have immediate benefit to it. Like looking at problems, it's not immediately going to feel better, but that's the difference between feeling better and getting better, is the willingness to look at them and not even immediately reframe it, but just look at it and keep looking at it until you realize like it's not something you have to avoid. It's just something that is, and it's your perspective that's causing you to feel a certain way about it. Your opinion that's causing you to feel a certain way about it. The thought that there's something wrong that's happening that causes you to tense up and get stressed and resist that, as opposed to looking at it for what it is and realizing like, oh, maybe this isn't a problem. Maybe it's just something that can be looked at and can be dealt with and experienced, but not something to be avoided. Because as long as it's something to be avoided, just throwing those clothes under your bed, that's the avoidance, as opposed to the whole process of putting it in the laundry and folding it up and putting it back in the closet takes way more time. But that's what allows it to not continue to fester. It's what allows it to be dealt with. So I know Tamara, you had your hand up, right? Yeah, cool.
It's gone. Levi.
Yeah, I was just being in these situations where you kind of most people know the situations that are stressful for them somehow. So it kind of I try to like not shy away from those situations, and I kind of embrace them and try to get in those uncomfortable situations quite often. And of course, I feel a lot, and I'm sure there is a lot of resistance going on, like under the surface, like when I do that, and I'm sure is getting better. But my question is in terms of energy and fatigue, because I feel like when I put in like 1 to 2 meetings a day with customers, for example, and I am parched like by the end of those meetings. I feel like I am, first of all, I feel I have to be like 100% there because you're trying to sell something to someone, and I don't know, it's just that whole situation as well. It's just very, I don't know. Just would love to hear some thoughts on that, because obviously I understand, like, you know getting tired is natural, but kind of I just feel so tired some days after challenging myself a lot.
I think that's totally fair. I mean, it can be like that. It's kind of like anything at first. Like it's tiring because it's so new. It's tiring because you're putting so much into it. But a lot of that is almost over effort to some degree. Like it's interesting after doing this long enough, you start to recognize like, oh, if I just think less about that meeting, like if there's less concern going into it, if there's less weight even during it, all of that, the meeting flies by. Conversation's way easier. It doesn't drain you as much. A lot of it's the weight that we add to ourselves. This was something that was said by one of our retreat goers this weekend. It's just in a moment of revelation. It's just, oh, we bring all the weight. It's like, yeah, we bring all the weight. Otherwise, it's just what it is. Right. But what you're doing is you're learning to go into those situations without falling back to your old habits or your old way of dealing with them, your old perceptions of talking to yourself and telling yourself you can or you cannot do it. And so all of this is new. And so every time you go into it, it's a new chance to push past that. But it does, in fact, get easier and the weight starts to dissipate. I mean, this is why I don't sleep very often. Or if I do sleep, it's for a little while and then back up and moving around. It's because, frankly, it's just not tiring for me to live. It used to be. It used to be exhausting just to get up and get going.
Yeah, for sure. Like being able to go through situations while recognizing that it doesn't mean anything about you will like that is really what sucks that energy. Like the thinking about ourselves. We've talked about it before, but just how much energy our brain uses, we very much discount that, I think. Like we just think of being tired and energy use in a physical way. But if you're constantly ruminating about yourself and how something went and what something means about you, that's using energy as well. It may not be in like the, caloric way, but it's still energy that you need to then recover from and you feel exhausted about. Like I remember my work meetings, I would get way more, especially years ago. I'd be fucking exhausted after some of those. Like a longer one. If we had one, most of them were like half hour, but if they were 2 hours long, I would be like, all right, I'm good for a while. Like we're gonna need a break. Whereas, going through our calls now, like there isn't that. Like we'll go 5 hours in a row. Like, yeah, feeling pretty good. I'll go work out after. There isn't so much of that. And so a lot of it, like we very much discount how much thinking about ourselves sucks our energy and how much just that the process of wondering and trying to find out and trying to find certainty, how much energy that takes, because it takes quite a bit. And it's a balance because if you're going through work things, it's like you want things maybe to work in a certain way, but it doesn't have to be you don't have to take it to the extreme of thinking that all of it means something about you. And usually the more you can focus on what's happening, the more you're paying attention, the better things tend to work out. Because when you're caught thinking about yourself, you're not paying attention. You can't simultaneously be caught in yourself thinking about how you're doing and paying attention to the situation. And then you miss things that you would have caught if you hadn't been thinking about yourself so much. So as much as you can go into a situation being like, I hope this goes in a certain way, in order for it to go in the way that you want, the best way for you to do that is to not be so concerned about what it's going to mean about you. And it's obviously easier said than done, but that process will certainly help not only allow the situation to go in a more seamless way, but also maintain a lot more of that energy. And before I pass it, in the comments, Julia, I saw your comment, and yes, I believe that was your comment that I saw. So I very much appreciate that triggering me to get into that episode. So glad you enjoyed it as well. And glad you're enjoying the podcast.
And to Levi.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of me in there in those meetings. I just wanted to share an experience I had maybe, I don't know, maybe 1.5 years ago or something. And I was at this retreat thing with a bunch of new people, which is stressful. I mean, anyway. And then we were there for like maybe 1 or 2 days, and then we were going to be there for like 3 more days after that. But 2 of those days was going to be like 48 hours of silence, no eye contact, no relationship with each other. And this is like, I think, like that moment when we turned off the need to relate to people. There was so much weight going off myself that it was just unbelievable. It was like, what the hell it was like, because I just noticed like how all the, I had 1,000 sensors out at all times, like calculating how I should do, what I should say, how I should look at them. And it was just insane. And then as soon as like we were supposed to talk to each other again, I just saw it turn on again, but it got a lot better. But it is crazy. Like, yeah, I can't believe I had any energy at all back then. But it's getting better, but it's going on still, of course. But yeah. Anyway, that was that.
Tamara, you had a follow-up for that.
I was just wondering, I had a question actually, and I'm arguing with myself in my own head as I'm even thinking to ask this question. So that's off to a good start. How much of like being tired from an activity, I hear everything everyone's saying about, getting yourself out of the way, and that, all that energy that it's taking to just be overthinking everything that's going on. And then I also think about activities and things that I do that are really tiring, and I will often attribute them to like they're out of alignment for me. Like there's something in this thing that I'm doing that is not, it's not the thing I should be doing. And I'm doing it because I feel like I should, or because, I don't know. It's like, it's almost like that tiredness, I think, can sometimes communicate to us that it's to go, hold on a second, what is this? And to take action potentially. And I'm just thinking about that in regards to some things that I don't want to do right now, and I'm avoiding them. And what is that? What's going on there?
Well, I think the nice thing about that, and this is something I've learned to have faith in over time, is the fact that through that experience of going through these things and recognizing like, this isn't really what I want. This isn't really what I want to do at all. There's the practice first and foremost. I'm throwing this right out there of just dealing with it because, you're there. This is what's happening right now. Pay attention to it, as it were. But just the feeling of that changes your other choices over time. And what you find is your life actually gravitates away from that track. You actually slowly move towards another track that does align better with you. But we have this tendency of thinking everything's just black and white. Like, I'm not here, I need to be there. Right. But we're always going through those gradations of gray area from one place to another naturally, just through having that experience. So I think it's important to both be honest about the experience you're having and at the same time recognize that you're strong enough to keep going through it as long as you need to. But that change is always happening. And I truly believe that as long as you're just honest about the experience you're having, you will find a way to change that experience. However long that takes is totally different for everybody, I would say.
Yeah, because even with that, I totally resonate with where you're coming from, and that thought of like, when do I make the choice to change the situation that I'm in or the things that I'm doing? Like, when is it something that I'm just avoiding versus something that requires a shift in my experience? And we like to think that we know how that shift is going to happen. Like, we like to think that, oh, I have to unplug myself from this, move over here, plug myself into this. But sometimes digging into the thing that you're doing, sometimes it's like, I don't know if you guys can see this super well, and my fucking green screen's not working well, but sometimes it's digging in to that allows you to pop up in another experience. So it's not always avoiding certain things or separating yourself from a situation and jumping into another one. Sometimes it could be, take a job, for example. Like, you're going through a job, you're not crazy about it, but you actually digging into it, someone notices that. They're like, oh, you're super focused on this. You're doing a great job. I'm actually going to be starting my own company, and I would love for you to be involved in it. if you had separated yourself from that as opposed to digging in, that shift wouldn't have happened in the same way. And so we like to think that we know how shifts happen or how they should happen or how they're going to happen, but we don't even know that. And so all that we have is the experience that we're going through. And it comes down to, in a lot of ways, just making the most of that. And it's also not to say that digging in is always the best thing. Sometimes it is unplugging, separating yourself, but that's not the only way for change to happen and for a shift to occur in your life. Sometimes it can be through going through all of the uncomfortable shit that you don't want to face, that things start to change. And things are always changing and shifting, and we're always changing and shifting. And we don't know how we're going to see things tomorrow or what tomorrow is going to bring or what opportunities are going to arise. And so, we have what we have in front of us, and we can make the most of it until we realize, like, all right, I'm going to go the unplugging route as opposed to digging in route. But we never actually know necessarily which one, or, it's not even two, it's infinite number of ways for things to happen. And we never know how they're going to, but the more attentive we are, usually that makes for the best case outcome or situation to arise.
Absolutely. I want to mention quickly, because we are coming close to the end, we've got about 20 minutes left here, that we are going to be continuing for another hour and a half in a group chat that you can join on our Patreon page, tier 2 and tier 3 tonight. There is a free trial available if you haven't joined our Patreon page, or if you've never gotten into any of our groups. It's totally worth it. 5 days a week, you can chat with Andrew and myself and the rest of our community. Likewise, we have a kick-ass Discord community, which is totally free to join. You don't, in fact, have to pay for anything or anything like that, but I do encourage you to do so. If you like this conversation and you want to be able to pick through things with other people who are willing to be vulnerable and honest about the stupid shit that we all kind of go through, I can't recommend it enough. It really is just about the community. That all said, there was a question that went by quickly, and I was hoping that we could cover it because I think it's really important. I'm going to throw it on the screen here. Why do we get so scared when good things happen to us? And I find this to be a really good question, because that is very much the case. We almost self-sabotage when good things are happening to us, and largely it's because it requires us to change. And so we'll tell ourselves we want change, we want change, we want change. But then we recognize that that means uncertainty. That means that we actually have to go into a situation that is risk and have faith in ourselves. And so often it's the idea of becoming someone else that scares us from those good things. Even though it would work out as it always has, the fact is that we don't know who would we be without all these fears. And so for you to let go of that fear and take advantage of that good thing would mean becoming someone else. So how attached are you to the idea of yourself? Andrew?
Yeah, fuck. That was well said, because it's always, we maintain an idea of ourselves and how things work out. Our perspective of that is going to be relative to how we see ourselves. So if we have a overarching negative idea of ourselves and good things happen, it doesn't match that idea of ourselves that we have. If we have the idea that good things don't happen to us, we're going to get really uncomfortable when a good thing happens, because it doesn't match that false certainty that we've settled upon. And it's the same on the flip side. If you have a really positive idea of yourself and you have this idea that, all good things happen to me all the time, I'm always, manifesting my life and receiving all this abundance all the time, and there's situations that are going to come up that aren't amazing, and that catches us off guard, because that doesn't match the story we've been telling ourselves either. And so it's not about telling yourself one story or the other. It's about not telling yourself so much of a story. And then you're just stepping into everything like, you're not caught off guard, not because you're having all of the stories, but because you're having none. It's not about thinking about yourself and seeing like, I can, I have this idea of myself and that idea of myself, and this is going to match this. It's like when there isn't so much of a story, it matches everything. Everything's at play. Any situation, any outcome, you can continue looking at it, continue experiencing, continue paying attention to it, because you're not fucking so caught off guard by the thing that arose, because you had attached to a story. And fuck, I'm realizing how much like me getting caught off guard this past week was from story, as much as like, I'm not what I think. It's there was, and again, it's like that part, and fuck, that's what was coming up on that Raw episode when I started crying like 2 weeks ago. That
Raw
that
65
was like,
for anybody wondering.
yeah, oh, that was like, yeah, it was interconnected to that whole experience I had last week, because it was, yeah, it was a component. It wasn't that I was telling myself a specific story, but there were components of my current reality that didn't include aspects of that story, because there were things that I had suppressed for a very long time, emotions that I had suppressed, feelings that I had suppressed for a very long time. And it's just, all it's showing you is, oh, you're still holding on to a story. You're still holding on to some stuff that you believe yourself to be. And anytime you believe yourself to be something, it's going to be harder to recognize yourself in everything, recognize yourself in everyone. And so it is all interconnected, digging deeper into all of your shit allows you to come out the other end without so many stories anymore, or a desire to avoid certain things, or a desire to cling to certain things, because they're all on the table, because you're not clinging to so much. And then again, through that is where the recognitions of yourself in everyone, that deeper empathy comes from. It comes from the shit. It comes from all of your experiences. So yeah, maintaining any idea of yourself is, you're going to get caught off guard one way or the other. When good things happen or when bad things happen, it's because you're continuing to maintain a story.
Yeah, it's funny. It's pervasive. Gets into everything. You don't even recognize how much it's underneath the surface, but it's something that we've been growing our entire lives. Again, anybody who hasn't checked out Discover Transcendence, which was a video I made years ago, I encourage you to check it out. It's 48 minutes, but we talk about Jane Levenger and her steps to ego development. There are steps to ego development, and there's a reason behind it. There really is. It's not about resisting it. It's not about killing your ego. It's about coming to terms with what it is. Having your eyes open from moment to moment to moment, so that way your actions are your own, rather than a result of being pushed and pulled by influences that you have been avoiding exist. That said, Amanda, I know you raised your hand before I changed the subject, so I'm going to throw this at you and ask if there's anything you'd like to join, which I'm sure there will be. The mute button is not working for you.
This topic about,
there it is.
Are you good? Okay.
Yeah, you're good. There was a delay.
I love the topic of discussing self-sabotage, and I totally agree with both of you. It has everything to do with the story that you think you are, and because you think that you're that old story in a new situation, you will respond in an old way because you're holding on to that old story. But one of the big insights that I had at the June retreat was just that I don't need the story of Amanda as much as I thought I needed her. I thought I needed to have this story, and it needed to be solid, and it needed to be authentic, and it needed to be independent and strong and all this other shit. But really, that's just a ship on the sea. Amanda's a ship, and I can stay on the ship, or I can hop off the ship, let the story go, and just swim in the uncertainty that is everything. And both options are totally fine. And the ego is also totally fine, because I'm not mad at my ego for my ego acting as a warrior. But as it portrayed that role, it viewed everything as war. So everything became a threat. Everything became a battle, because the ego was trying to protect itself in this imaginary warfare that both started and ended with itself, because the threats, if they are fatal, if they are life-threatening, that's one thing. But for the most part, it's just the idea of a threat that really causes us to panic in so many ways. And I also like the topic of how that affects us at work. When I came back from the April retreat, I definitely was in a funk, and I was only in the funk because I thought that working hard meant something about me. And so not wanting to work hard in the way that I did before the retreat, I thought meant something. And then once I let go of the fact that working hard or not working hard, fucking off, fucking around at work, being attentive at work, none of those things mean anything. They're just the experience. But I did give myself the space to just sit in like laziness. And I was like, you know what? I don't want to fucking do anything. And so I'm not. And I sat in that. And I sat in that for like an hour or two, one work day. And then I was like, now that I've given myself what I thought I wanted, I don't fucking want this. And I never actually wanted it. I just had an idea that I couldn't do the work. that I wasn't capable, or that I wasn't ready or suitable for it. And because I felt that I was disconnected, I wanted to reject it. And that rejection and that suppression of why do we avoid so many things, in my opinion, is just like a reflex, or it's just like the process of breathing. So you don't actually have to think to breathe, right? You just breathe. But if you apply some attention and awareness to that process of breathing that normally does not require your attention, but when you add that attention, it deepens the experience. And so I'm not mad at myself when I have a reflex that suppresses. In fact, I almost expect it, because to feel suppression, to not feel avoidance or running, that's not the full experience that I've had so far. And when I do think of what I used to do and how I used to lash out and snap, I appreciate that, because I know in my mind now, I tried that approach and it fucking blew up in my face. And so I don't want to forget that I took that approach. I appreciate that I remember it, and that I realize now that I didn't need to do it then, and I don't need to do it now. And so when I think about like antidepressants or numbing or suppressing, all of those things feel like they avoid the symptoms. But if I avoid the symptoms, I'll never get to the root, and I'll never find out why I push things away. And that part of the process is liberating. And so for me, freedom is home, or home is the process of discovering, of feeling free is home. And I take that with me everywhere and into every situation that I'm ever in, whether I have something similar of a point of reference or not. You know, I'm always with me, and we're always figuring it out. And so the stories are not needed. They are useful. And as Tamara so beautifully put during the June retreat, all stories are fucked. So when you keep that in mind, they lose a bit of the weight. And I think maybe the weight just comes from a perceived lack of meaning, because their meaning can be found in anything. But when I think about the things that were the heaviest, it's always the things that I thought meant I was worthless or meaningless. And that lack of meaning is where I feel the most weight, both prior to finding DU and now.
Fucking A. Well said, as always. And I really like that example of kind of going back and forth, like allowing yourself to feel certain things that you thought weren't right, you know, coming out of the other retreat, going back to work, feeling like there are certain ways to go about things. And it comes back to understanding that there's no right way to go about things. But the process of experiencing reality, like having this experience, is coming closer to that recognition that there is no right way. And until you experience a bunch of fucking shit, like all the shit, and thinking that, oh, so one of these has to be the right way, you'll come closer to the recognition that it isn't. So going back and forth, it's like being on that pendulum swinging and thinking like, oh, this is the right way. You know, you got to be super, super focused. You got to have a strict morning routine. You got to do all these things. Like, that's the right way. And then it'll hit you. Oh, that's not the right way. And then so you swing to something else, and oh, I'm going to do fucking nothing. I'm going to do fuck all for, you know, a few weeks. It's like, maybe that's the right way. It's like, no, it's not that either. And it's a balance of all of it, like all ends of the spectrum, from being willing to dig into something super deep, being willing to take a step back and just take a breather. Like, they're all components. And so if you look at reality as just the gaining of experiences, like going through all of it, going through the feelings when you're younger, going through the shitty situations, suppressing those feelings, that's another experience to be had. Suppressing them even more, another experience to be had. Eventually they're going to fucking come up. That's another experience to be had. So there isn't so much of a good or a bad experience, or right or wrong experience. There's no experiences to be avoided, because they're all components that add more to you, that, you know, tools in your fucking toolbox. And then that allows you to connect. And there's certain things that will allow you to alleviate some of your own suffering. And there's certain degrees of suffering that will allow you to connect more deeply with someone else and maybe help them have a different perspective, and then alleviate some of their suffering. And so we have this idea that, like, oh, I just want to feel better. I just want to feel good all the time. But there's so much more to experience than just that side of things. And so much of the depths of our shit inform all of the amazing things and give us an appreciation for those experiences and the connection when they can come in tandem, going through some shitty shit, and then someone else comes across and they're going through some shitty shit, and then you have a connection, and then it's not so much shitty shit anymore, and then it's a deep connection that's actually beautiful, but it wouldn't have been there without the shitty stuff. And so we like to parse out certain things like, oh, this is the right way to be, this is the right way to act, this is the right way to live, and it's never that. And so it's just being willing to experience all of it, like looking at an experience and just being like, yeah, all right, here's another experience to be had. Didn't see this one coming, but here it is. Let's pay attention to it and learn as much as we can from it, because it's not going to last forever. So let's see what we can get out of it. And that's all that life is just getting the most out of every experience. And the less judgment you have of it allows you to experience it more and more fully. And yeah, that's what a lot of it comes down to, I think.
It really does come down to faith. And it's largely because, and I was saying this in the private chat, because we have a little private chat section here in this new interface that we have, that your thoughts will always justify the perception that keeps you focused on them. So if you don't question your thoughts, you will end up in a repetitive cycle of perception. That's it. Because your thoughts are just going to keep telling you, no, that's what you got to keep thinking. You keep thinking that. That's how we survive. So you have to question it in order to live life. Otherwise, you're just living in perception. And if it stagnates, it stops feeling like living. Amanda, you had your hand up.
Yes, first try. Fuck yes. All right. That's a victory. I love them. No, but I wanted to make one last point about Andrew. I love the analogy that you were using about like unplugging or digging deep. And so what I want to say about that was that it feels very like yin and yang. So like the process of digging deep leads to unplugging, and unplugging leads to that digging deep. And the example I wanted to give was just the one that I used before about how I felt disconnected from work. And that whole process included me fucking off. That process included me not wanting to work, letting myself not work, and then realizing I didn't want to stay there, and then making the choice to get back into work or to become more present. So the whole process of being disconnected or not is also leading up to the decision that you make. It's like when you jump, the part where you're picking momentum.
Unfortunately, you're breaking up on us, Amanda.
It is. But just hello there, I come in peace.
Sort of. Yeah, unfortunately, the last little bit garbled on us. Yeah, unfortunately,
okay.
You are stuck. So before we run out of time, because we only have 4 minutes left, PMAC, you had your hand up. You would like to follow up? Sorry, Amanda.
I can just continue Amanda's thoughts because that's exactly what's happening at work. So it's like I'm getting stressed, and so therefore I'm not paying attention in the team meetings because it's like, why am I sitting here listening to other people talk about their problems? I've got problems of my own. Like, why don't I just do some emails on the side and not really pay attention? Meanwhile, telling my boss that I don't have enough time, like there is too much on my workload, and she's like telling me in those meetings the way that she's solving the problems for me, and I'm like looking at emails being like, this is not important. And it's just like such a crack up when you realize that, like, okay, you can just chill. If you pay attention to what's in front of you, you'll get the answers that you need. But you have an expectation that the way that things are going to ease up for you is by them doing X. So unless they do X, like I'm still going to be busy. I don't care what else you're doing. And yeah, just like being completely veiled in what you're doing. Just like, what's going on here? Like, what are these things? And it's just like, hold on, just take a second. Like, this is what it is.
More often than not, that really is the only thing that we can do that would add anything to our life. Just take a second. Just stop before you give in to that urge to react. Breathe. Try to remove whatever need and fear you're holding on to, and then act. But we never take that step. We very rarely, because we just don't like the way we feel. Jesus, this is uncomfortable. I got to do something. And we reach for the first half-baked fucking idea that we have, just because it promises some cessation to the discomfort that we're going through. But if we just sat in it just long enough, it's like getting into a pool and then jumping right out. It's like, it's cold. And it's like, yeah, give it a second. It'll adjust, but you have to give it a second. And we rarely do. And it's because we don't think we can face that discomfort. We really do get afraid just because we don't think we're strong enough. That's all it is. And the only thing we're doing there is making an assumption, because if you weren't strong enough, you wouldn't fucking be here still. So you've been wrong this whole time. What makes you think you're right now? We have about 2 minutes left. I'm going to pass it over to Andrew to wrap this shit up. But I wanted to say very quickly a couple of things. Thank you to everybody who participated in this, whether you're here on the screen with us or you're in the chat section. We really do appreciate you being here. I also want to give a shout out to Restream for this fantastic interface. This has been a lot of fun. We've been able to throw up some comments. We've been able to throw up some quotes. We've been able to do all kinds of shit on the screen, which is definitely a lot of fun on Twitch or YouTube or anything. If you can join us in 20 minutes-ish, we're going to be doing a tier 2 call for 90 minutes. You can join us, chat with us, ask us a question, anything you'd like, and we would love to see you. And free trials are available. Andrew, time to shut her down.
And just scan that QR code over there for Patreon. It's a great time, and we have a free trial, so it's totally free. But yeah, fuck, this has been a blast. I appreciate all of you very much. Going round and round about all of it, digging in, and PMAC with that last point. I had a thought, and that with paying attention, it's like, it's so funny how we cut ourselves off and we continue missing things over and over and over that just perpetuates the things that we're dealing with, the things we're struggling with. It's like at some point you come back to paying attention, you're like, oh shit, it's right there. It's been right there the whole time. And that's so many things in reality, in our experience. So I resonate with that a lot. And a lot of it just comes back to recognizing that the processing is happening, whether you're managing it or not, it's being processed. So you can continue to pay attention without the need to feel like how it's being processed or how it's going. But anyway, this has been a blast. As always, looking forward to continuing on Patreon very soon. I appreciate all of you very much. And if we don't talk to you in 15 minutes, we'll talk to you very shortly or soon.
Bye, everyone.